Good afternoon from Edinburgh, everybody. How are you all doing? It's Joe and Mike on their walking tour. It's becoming a regular event. Thank you very much for all the views we've been getting. The last one, I believe, was up at 15,000, and we are going worldwide. As you know, that Mike and I, we love what we do, but we've got no work on at the moment, so we love spending time with you. So all your contributions are absolutely wonderful. We love it a lot. Now we're going to start on our tour. I mentioned on the last tour that Edinburgh was the first city in the world to gain the title of the UNESCO City of Literature. So it's no coincidence that I'm standing here outside Edinburgh City Library. Now, the Edinburgh City Library is, again, erected due to the kindness of one of our great Scots. I wonder if you can think who I'm going to mention here. Andrew Carnegie. Now, in the States, I think you call him Andrew Carnegie. In Scotland, it's Andrew Carnegie. Great man, wealthy man, left a fortune to the people of Scotland, and this is one of his libraries here. You can tell it's a library with his money because they've got the Carnegie motto up there, "Let there be light." So this is a lending library. You can take books out of this library, but just across the street from here is the National Library of Scotland. The National Library of Scotland, just let the bus go by there. The National Library of Scotland is like Scotland's memory. All of our historical documents are held in the National Library of Scotland here. It's a reference library. You're not allowed to take any books out of there at all. Great place for research. If you're in Edinburgh, it also has a great cafe to go into as well. Lovely building on the inside, and a little shop you can buy your stuff as well. Now, the UNESCO City of Literature, Edinburgh also runs one of the largest book festivals in the world. Now, why do we get the UNESCO City of Literature? Well, there are so many famous authors who lived here and currently live here. Now, we've mentioned a few in the past. We've mentioned Robert Louis Stevenson. We've mentioned Sir Walter Scott. Another famous author from this part of the country here is Arthur Conan Doyle. I'm sure you know him, Sherlock Holmes. Well, Arthur Conan Doyle is from Edinburgh. And we're going to talk about J.K. Rowling's in a bit more detail. In fact, we're going to do a little J.K. Rowling's kind of walk. But one person you might have heard of as well is Alexander McCall Smith. Now, he had a TV show based on his books. You may have seen the #1 Ladies Detective Agency in Botswana. More modern crime writer, we've got Ian Rankin. I'm sure you might have known Ian Rankin, seen some of his on TV as well. His main character is a Rebus character, lovely detective stories. But some of the other ones you may not have heard of, but I would highly recommend if you're looking for some Scottish authors or even authors who are writing about Scotland. There's Kate Atkinson, there's Maggie O'Farrell, and I'm also going to mention J.M. Barrie. Now, J.M. Barrie didn't come from Edinburgh, but he studied at Edinburgh University. J.M. Barrie, you may know him, Peter Pan. He did the Peter Pan plays, that's J.M. Barrie. Ian Banks is another good Scottish author I'd highly recommend. Two people I'm reading at the moment is Leslie Kelly and E.S. Thompson. Highly recommend going to pick up some of these authors, and again, join up with the Edinburgh International Book Festival. It's free of charge, and there are hundreds of authors taking place in it from all over the world, and you never know, your favourite author might be there as well. We're going to start our walk now, but before I start my walk, I guess no kilt today. But I've got on my World Peace Tartan trousers, or trews. I've got my jacket, which I got designed here in Edinburgh, inspired by Outlander. I'm sure we've got a few Outlander fans in there as well. We'll talk a wee bit more about Outlander as we do our tours around Edinburgh as well. So let's walk on, and we'll start taking you down to the old town of Edinburgh. And look at the architecture of the City Library here. It's a wonderful building. As normal with the Edinburgh buildings, it's 4 floors on this level here, but on the back of it, it drops down for another 6. So it's about a 10, 11-storey building as well. Likewise, the same with the National Library over here. You can see only one part of it. It's like an iceberg. You only see a little part at the top. It actually drops down another couple of 100 feet. And even further, because they keep the National Archives in air-conditioned, temperature-controlled rooms. Now, the part of the city we're going to take you down Victoria Street. Victoria Street leads down to the Grassmarket. So I particularly like Victoria Street. It's a great street. It's got individual little shops and stores. Lots of great little designers in the stores here. Lovely restaurants as well. And you can see from the number of people on the street that things are really happening here in Edinburgh. A lot of tourists are back in town, enjoying the walks around the city. And we would love to welcome you all back to Scotland when you come back here next year. And I know some few people who were supposed to be here this year but had to postpone. I'm looking forward to seeing you all back here. Now this Victoria Street, this relates to J.K. Rowling's to a great extent, because this is the area that J.K. Rowling's would be walking around. Remember, she was a single mother. She couldn't afford to heat her apartment. So she would sit in cafes in this area here, and she'd wander the streets. And this actual street that we're going down here, Victoria Street, actually appears as diagonally in her books. So you can see, and there are some shops down here dedicated to the boy wizard, which we'll point out as well. So it's a living city, living authors in it, and some great little design shops in Victoria Street. In fact, the jacket that I'm wearing was actually designed by a little store down here called Walker Slater. It's actually pure wool from a Scottish woolen mill and designed here in Edinburgh. The trousers are also wool, so Scottish wool, and it's a world peace tartan. You can see it is fairly busy down here. So some of the authors have actually come to live here. J.K. Rowling herself, she wasn't born in Edinburgh, but she came over, or came up from down south, and decided to stay here. And a few of the other authors do the same because of the reputation of the city, and it provides a good backdrop. Now here's one of my little favourite stores here in Edinburgh. This is Walker Slater. If you want anything designed individually, it's all bespoke stuff in here. Hi guys. Lovely little store. They've got a men's and women's department in here. Great designers, and they've got great quality clothing in here as well. I also like to come down here with groups, because a lot of people like to come down and find somewhere atmospheric to eat. And I'll have to point at some of the restaurants that are here. The good thing about Victoria Street is it's a double-decker street. Hi ladies. It's a double-decker street. What do you mean by that? Well, there's two levels. So we're walking down one level, but up on the other side there are some restaurants up above us. There's Mike can pick up the fish and chip shop here. Now, normally at this time of the year, the Edinburgh International Festival would be going on. We talk about the Edinburgh International Festival, but it's actually more than one festival. It's a book festival, it's a theatre festival, it's a comedy festival, it's a music festival, dance and opera. It's the biggest cultural festival that takes place in Europe, and indeed, we believe, in the world. And to top it all off, we did mention the Edinburgh military tattoo, which is also part of the festival itself. Most things are put on hold for this year, but hopefully next year, everything will be back to normal. So we'll continue a walk down Victoria Street. And of course, one of the favourite places that I like people to visit here, we've got a little whiskey shop. Guys in here are experts. Whichever whiskey you like, they'll give you a little whiskey tasting. They're experts in their trade. And you can actually make your own whiskies as well. So you make your own blend. This is one of my other favourite little stores coming down here. So you've got everything, all your essential food groups are here. You got your whiskey shop, you got your cheese shop, and you've got your pulled pork shop. Favourite little cheese shop in here. So whiskey and cheese tasting, not bad. Now, one of the things about Edinburgh that we'd like to go talk about as well. We've been asked a few little things about, well, what's the difference between the churches in Scotland? We do get asked that quite a lot. And mainly, what is the difference between the Church of Scotland and the Church of England? Well, this can be explained fairly simply. The Church of England has got a hierarchy. So it's got its bishops and archbishops, and obviously the Queen is the head of the Church of England. The Church of Scotland, however, has a completely flat structure. It's Presbyterian. The idea is that there should be nobody between you and your God. So there'll be nobody above us. And even the Queen is not the head of the Church of Scotland. She is known as the defender of the faith, but she's nobody above us in terms of our relationship with the God. And hence we've got a much flatter structure. Scotland used to be a Catholic country back in the 1500s. However, there was all over Europe, there was a movement to reform the church because people were falling out with the Catholic churches with all the indulgences that were being asked. And here, we were exactly the same. We went through a theological revolution. The Reformation itself was not an event as such. It actually was a process. And it was the religious divides or the religious struggles in this country went on for about 150 years. We're going to talk a little bit more about a specific part of that when we get up to the cemetery we're going to visit later on. But the Church of Scotland itself was established in the 1500s. And through the whole religious strife that we went through, I mean, it's over 150 years, and 2 monarchs lost their heads over the struggles. And there was struggles. So we got Mary, Queen of Scots, got her head chopped off, and Charles I also had his head chopped off. We had a way of dealing with the monarchs in those days. Hi guys. Now we'll talk a little bit about Mary, Queen of Scots. Mary was brought up actually in France. She was sent over to France for her own safety. When she was younger, Henry VIII was the king in England. Henry VIII wanted his young son to be betrothed to Mary, the baby Mary. Of course, her father, James V, didn't want that. So what did Henry do? What Henry always do, he attacked Scotland. It was called the War of the Rough Wooing. So he tried to woo the Scots by attacking us. Didn't work. James V was killed, and her mother, so Mary's mother, Marie de Guise, decided to send her over to France for her own safekeeping. So Marie de Guise, the French mother, was reigned in her absence while little Mary was brought up in the French court. In the meantime, though, this country was changing. We were going through basically a revolution, a religious revolution. And Protestantism was taking grip over here. Mary finally married the prince in France, the Dauphin. However, the marriage didn't last very long, and he died of an ear infection. Now, it's her misfortune that the family she married into were the Medicis, probably one of the most feared families in Europe. And Catherine de' Medici did not want Mary of Scotland, or Mary Queen of Scots, to be the Queen of France on her own. So she was stripped of her title of monarch. So she had the choice of coming back to Scotland. They tried to marry her off to other families in Europe, but the other families, specifically the Portuguese, the prince there looked just as weak as the one that was in France. She decided to come back to this country, but this country didn't really want Mary because she was Catholic, she's brought up in the Catholic faith, and she came over here and this country was turning Protestant. And this led to hundreds of years of turmoil for Scotland. And we went through a place at a time which we call the Kaling Fields, and Mike is going to talk a little bit more about these people when we get there. But one of the point is that down here in the Grassmarket, there is a monument to where these people called the Covenanters were hanged, sometimes by the 20 at a time. And Mike will talk a little bit more about them as we go down. Now I just want to scan around. You'll see the beautiful architecture here in Victoria Street. And if you look up the street, there's another Walker Slater here, the ladies department. And above there, you'll see what I mean by the double-decker streets, because there's another terrace up there, a little pub called the Castle Arms. Lovely little pub up there. And look at the height of the buildings as well. Edinburgh uses its hills to the great effect, so all the buildings are built into the hills. In fact, in the day, these were probably the tallest buildings in Europe. Edinburgh was a walled city. You were not allowed to build outside the city walls, so the buildings got higher and higher as the population grew. And you can see we've got buildings on top of buildings here. We don't do this thing of tearing down. We like to preserve our history and our architecture here. And also, we mentioned before in one of our other tours about bringing water into the city of Edinburgh. Well, here we have one of our wellheads. This is where I mentioned before that we got all your water cooler gossip here. And you can see the dates in here. 1674. When the water was actually brought into the city. And the girls say this is where you catch all your gossip and as to who was doing what to whom and all the intrigue that would go on here. I don't think they'll be opening it up again at all. I wouldn't certainly drink water out of that at all. But it's given an idea as to the age of this whole quarter down here in the Grassmarket. So, Old Jock's Kitchen. How you doing?
Good, thank you, sir. How are you doing?
We're doing very well. We're going to be talking about you in a wee minute when we get further up.
Thank you.
You get some really, really nice characters here in Edinburgh as well. We got asked on one of the emails I got asked about some of the great people of Scotland that, and this is usually for the expatriate Scots. They say, why don't you talk about Alexander Graham Bell or John Logie Baird? So I will talk about them. So here's the quiz for you. This is for Agnes. Hope you're still watching, Agnes. Who invented the telephone? Alexander Graham Bell. Where did he come from? Edinburgh, of course. Who was the father of electromagnetism? James Clerk Maxwell. Where did he come from? Edinburgh, of course. And then who invented the television? John Logie Baird. Where did he come from? He didn't come from Edinburgh. He came from Scotland, but he didn't come from Edinburgh. So, any time that you actually pick up one of these smartphones that we all have nowadays, which we were using to record, you pick up one of these. If it wasn't for those three guys, we wouldn't have these things. So you can say that we are the root of all evil, with those three guys giving us this in our hand here. But the Scots like to talk about it. We gave the world this industrial revolution. We invented so many things. I always like to say, if we were cheese, we would eat ourselves. So we're walking up the street called Candlemaker Row. Candlemaker Row, it does exactly what it means on the tin. This is where they make the candles. The candle makers were always kept out of the city walls because it was so dangerous. So they kept them well away so they couldn't cause fires. And Candlemaker Row itself was outside the city walls. Now I want to point out here, now we started at the Edinburgh City Library. We've just come in a little circle. And if we look over here now, you can see a bridge. This building here is the back of the Edinburgh City Library. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 floors. But there was only 4 floors on the other side. So GPS is quite difficult to use here in Edinburgh because there's streets on top of streets on top of streets. And sometimes your taxi drivers, thank you. And sometimes where you get taxi drivers, like particularly the Uber drivers, who have not done their tests of their knowledge, when they come to the city, you get dropped off in the wrong place. Because all they're doing is using their GPS. So you could be up on one street and you want to be 500 feet below. Education used to be in the hands of the Catholic Church, and it was usually only the elite who could be educated. So it was the sons and daughters of the elite, mainly the sons in those days, and education was only for the elite. Come the Reformation, however, this all opened up because the Presbyterian Church believed that all of the citizens of Scotland should be able to read the Bible in their own language. Whether that was in English, Gaelic, or even in Scots dialect, they had to be able to read. And so the literacy level in Scotland, over a period of about 5 or 10 years, went from about 9% to about 80%. So the Scots became one of the most literate nations in Europe at the time. And this is back in the 1500s. So the churches organised the schools. And they also opened up the universities, because again, the universities were controlled by the Catholic Church. But come the Reformation, they were opened up to everybody. And to this day in Scotland, anybody who's Scottish can be educated to the highest level up through university free of charge. We are the only place in the United Kingdom that does this. And we protect our education, so the education system in Scotland is very different from the education system in England. And in Edinburgh itself, we have 4 universities here in Edinburgh. The oldest of the 4 would be Edinburgh University itself. The Edinburgh University is where Mike and I graduated as Blue Badge Guides, so we are alumni of Edinburgh University. We also have Heriot-Watt University. We have Napier. Some of you may be of an age where you remember logarithms. Another great Scot, John Napier, genius, came up with logarithms. So there's Napier University, and the last one is Queen Margaret University. So we've got 4 universities in the city. It's a big university town. And students should be coming back in September. Again, the atmosphere of the city does change quite a lot when the students are all back in town. The Scottish universities are also very popular with a lot of people from the United States and Canada, because it's a lot cheaper to be educated here than it is in the States. And some people come over here to do their pre-med schools as well. Now, one of the characters I want to talk about is a little dog, and his name is Greyfriars Bobby. So we're talking in the 1800s. There was a man called John Grey, who's also known as Old Jock. Do you remember we passed Old Jock's kitchen? Well, Old Jock was a gardener, but he lost his job as a gardener, so he came into Edinburgh and he actually joined with the police force here at the time. And he adopted this little dog called Bobby. Bobby was a little Skye Terrier. And Jock and Bobby would be seen every night going around the city together. They were inseparable. And they walked around this area of the city, so they're very, very well known. However, years of working at nights, being out in the cold in Edinburgh, Jock Grey, the owner, actually succumbed to tuberculosis. So on the funeral of Jock Grey, and we're going to go in to see his grave in a minute, the little dog followed the funeral hearse and followed it all the way into the cemetery where Jock got buried. And the little dog would not leave the grave of his master. So he sat in the grave for up to 13 years. He became well known in Edinburgh. People would come all over to see him. They tried to take him inside, but he would always escape and go back to the grave. Now, in Edinburgh, we have what's known as the 1 o'clock gun. Every day at 1 o'clock, there's a cannon fire from Edinburgh Castle. It's a time check for the city. So every day at 1 o'clock, the little dog used to leave the grave of his master, come down the street they were on now, go down to the little cafe, Old Jock's Cafe. He'd be given a meat pie for his lunch, and then he would return back to the grave and sit on the grave. As I mentioned, he became very well known. People come from all over Edinburgh to see him and all over the country. His loyalty was seen as a great character for not for the dog, but for the city as well. His loyalty to his master. And he was rewarded because they passed a law that dogs were not allowed to be going to cemeteries, but they actually passed the law to allow him. And the mayor, we call him the Lord Provost, the mayor of Edinburgh, actually awarded the little dog a little collar and he was given the freedom of the city. And his collar is still on display in the National Museum of Scotland. And we're just going to come up to a little statue of the dog. Now, I did say before that if you're famous or even infamous in Edinburgh, you will get a pub named after you. And so here we have a pub called Greyfriars Bobby's. It's a tavern. Again, we've got lovely lunches in here as well. And just opposite the pub, we have a statue dedicated to the little dog. There's a little fountain here. And this is erected in his name. Cute little guy, Greyfriars Bobby. Now again, people have started this thing of touching the statue's nose for luck. It does not bring you luck. It's probably bring you bad luck to touch these things as well. But this is a little character. And you can see his little golden nose there. I strongly recommend not touching the nose of the dog. Because you don't know what diseases are going to be on there. But he is well celebrated here in Scotland. And then you can see opposite, you've got the Greyfriars Bobby pub dedicated to him as well. Now we're going to go into the cemetery and we're going to go to Jock's grave and also show you the gravestone for Bobby himself as well. And we did mention J.K. Rowling's, and J.K. Rowling's herself, she would come in here and she would be walking through the cemetery and she would use the gravestones for the sources of some of the names of her characters in the book. So this is Greyfriars. This is one of the oldest cemeteries in Edinburgh and it is steeped in history, and Mike's going to talk a wee bit more about the history of it itself. But have a look here. This is a gravestone dedicated to Greyfriars Bobby. Again, another tradition, people bring sticks because dogs love sticks, and they build a little pile of sticks here. And the inscription says, "Let his loyalty and devotion be a lesson to us all." And this is erected by the Dog Aid Society of Scotland. I mentioned also in our previous tours about the grave stealers. These were the guys, they were called resurrectionists, and they would steal the bodies from the grave and sell the bodies to the university. I mentioned in particular two characters who were famous or infamous, Mr. Burke and Mr. Hare, and they turned it into a full industry. And when you're in here, you'll see what the local people did to try and prevent the bodies being stolen. They would actually lay the gravestones flat. And so people wonder why we have the flat gravestones here. And this is specifically to prevent the bodies being stolen back in the 1800s. I mentioned also that Burke and Hare, they got beyond stealing the bodies from the graves, and they actually would start to go on a murder spree. So they had the freshest corpses. So if you come into Scotland and you're looking for guides, we could also organise driver guides for you, walking tours, we can recommend hotels. This is why I was recommending that you go onto our Eyes on Scotland Facebook. There's 20 of us in there, and I'm sure you'll see your favourite. If you've been with us before, you'll meet your favourites there. But also if you're looking to come to Scotland next year and you're looking for something very different, then let us help you design your little tours. I'm going to take you over here to show you the grave of John Grey, and this is where Greyfriars Bobby would settle himself. They actually made a little bed for him underneath the gravestones here apparently, and these are the gravestones that are laid out flat to prevent the bodies being stolen from the graves. But there are some wonderful gravestones to walk around here, and people spend their afternoons walking in here. And as I mentioned, we will show you some of the places that J.K. Rowling's actually got her ideas for some of the characters here in the cemetery of Greyfriars. I always think it's very interesting. A little dog has created so much interest. Walt Disney did a movie, Greyfriars Bobby, so if you're looking for another Scottish movie, there you go, you can get Greyfriars Bobby. You'll be in tears by the end of it. It's such a romantic and such a little tearjerker of a story. And of course Walt Disney did Greyfriars Bobby, really proud.